So you guys have had a lot of talking, so I'm going to start by showing you a fancy video because it might break things up a little bit. But over the last couple of years, I've been coming back to DLD as our technology has been developing, and we've now reached something of a crescendo. So I wanted to show you guys a little bit of what we've been working on before I jump into the talk. There we go.
Whilst games today might have millions of players at the same time, those players are actually quite siloed. As you add players into a game world, quickly the amount of data you have to send snowballs, and you have to build specialized systems to handle that amount of workload. If you have a game with 100 players inside of it, and then you want to scale that up to a game with 10,000 players inside of it, that's not 100 times more complex to do. It's actually 10,000 times more complex to do.
This is so cool. All right, y'all. Let's go.
So what started as a promising technical demonstration had turned into an actual gameplay experience unlike anything any of us had ever been in before.
Let's go, Voyager. That was the greatest shit I've ever seen! And let loose the dogs of war!
So we've made some progress since I've been at DLD. As you can tell from the video, I'm excessively interested in video games. Over the last year, we've put on hundreds of virtual events, including multiple full-length baseball games, album launch parties for some of the biggest bands in the world, hundreds of meetups, gatherings, game experiences. Recently, we took a popular Twitch streamer and let him fight the entire Twitch channel, all couple thousand people who came to see him. And all of this I pursued because of entertainment and a desire to live in other worlds. And what's changed over the last year, and kind of prompted this talk, is that the meaning of this activity has shifted drastically in the presence of AI. We're now living in a world where I don't think anyone here is going to have the job they have today in 5 years, 6 years' time. Whether you're a journalist or, frankly, a CEO, you're going to find your work at worst augmented and at best maybe even gone because of what automation will do to us. And in that light, virtual worlds really take on a completely different function. And in fact, at an economic and social lens, it behooves us to come up with a different framework to think about their value, and in so doing, maybe even reconsider how we valued other things in our society, which I'll come on to. We're at a point now where the behavior change from AI is already seeping into our society. And I can prove that right here, I think. Who here is in love with a robot? At least one, two people. There's about 7% of American adults now say that they would be open to a relationship with an AI chatbot. 30 million people use Replica, and according to the company, 60% of the people, these are again American adults, what's happening in America, have engaged in romantic relations with chatbots. So we're already at the point of a deep shift in the meaning in our relationship with virtual experiences and virtual characters. And I think what comes next is unlocking the potential of an entire economy in which the economic agents in our economy are not just people, but also AI. And where I think the borderlands of that transition most exist are in virtual worlds. You see, virtual worlds are already a very different kind of economy to the real world, but they are economies. There is labor performed in virtual worlds. If you have kids that play Fortnite, or perhaps some of you, has anyone here played like Call of Duty, Fortnite, any of those types of games? 1, 2, 3, okay, more than a few. So in those games, there's actually labor being performed. If you're in the matchmaking queue of those games, you're adding value to the experience of other people. If you stop playing, other people can't play. And if you play and lose and even die, you're actually creating value for those paying customers who are engaging in that experience because they want to shoot you, because they want to interact with you. And the same is true for role-playing games, or simulation games, or any number of other social or entertainment experiences that happen inside virtual worlds. You're not just playing, you're actually participating in a job. What's interesting is that these jobs are very unlikely to be automated, not really in the same way as real-world labor. Why? Because the meaning of this work doesn't come from productivity. It comes from the fact that you're engaging in an activity that enriches the experience of other human beings. So what will happen as more and more of our jobs get automated is that more and more of these experiences will stop being entertainment and start becoming central to how our society functions. For young people, that's already true. But for an increasingly displaced community of people who are either underemployed or not necessarily getting the most fulfilling labor from what they do on a day-to-day basis, ever more complex video games become, whether we like it or not, the necessary antidote for a world in which more meaning is required. But it's not enough. And it's not enough to mitigate the massive social and economic change that AI is going to take us towards. We also need new infrastructure that goes beyond just the embodied experience of virtual worlds, but starts to allow them to have more meaning, more impact in the real world. And this, I think, is why my company and myself have started to take a completely different look at blockchain and cryptocurrency. Who here has a negative view of this stuff? I'm very curious. Every year at DLD, I get different views. So a negative view. I mean, a lot of people do. I myself had a very negative view of it until just a couple of years ago. And mostly because it's been used for so many scams, so many problems, but also it's difficult sometimes to imagine what problem cryptocurrency and blockchain are solving, especially if you're an engineer already building large-scale systems. But with the inclusion of AI agents in our economy and AI agents as living actors in our experience in virtual worlds, there are certain problems we need to solve. One of those problems is, well, how do I have a bank account if I'm an AI? Do I take my passport to the bank? Probably not. How do I give money or take money from an AI? How do I have permanent experiences as, say, your AI girlfriend that aren't erased? Where is that information going to live? How do I take an agent and have it interact in multiple systems or work in multiple organizations simultaneously? The interesting thing is if cryptocurrency and blockchain didn't exist, we'd probably have to invent them to solve the problem of banking AI agents. We'd probably have to invent them to solve the problem of sharing the value created by agents across multiple organizations. So in theory, we have a really powerful solution to expand virtual worlds and expand the virtual economy into something different. The problem is the infrastructure just hasn't been there. Probably the most criminal sin of cryptocurrency for me hasn't been the scams. It hasn't been the lack of utility. It's been the terrible, terrible technology. The average number of transactions in some of these systems is like 10, 20 transactions a second. Visa and MasterCard do 50,000, 60,000 transactions a second. So over the last year, we've been building a completely new blockchain, which is compatible with Ethereum. And after a hell of a lot of deep distributed systems work, it can handle 500,000 transactions a second. So we're not the only company working on what you might think of as next generation blockchain technology, but we're probably the first one explicitly doing it for AI, and for the purpose of AI agents being able to have on-chain state and computation, and being able to create very complex interpersonal economies between agents that both affect virtual worlds and go beyond it. We're already in testnet. We're launching this in about 2 months' time. And I guess part of why I wanted to give this talk was to try to reignite the conversation about the utility of cryptocurrency in a post-AI world. I think if you've already had a hardened view about what this technology can do for your company or what narrative you're communicating about it in the press, now might be a great moment to really reconsider its utility and its probability of being useful to you in a kind of post-AI world. So I also want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and problems that come from a world in which people are falling in love with AI girlfriends and more interested in cryptocurrency, and how we mitigate some of those concerns. The biggest issue, the biggest loss for me, and I think the way I would articulate the greatest fear I would have for this, is the loss of agency. And that loss of agency is really exacerbated when the things that matter to you, whether it's the role you have in a video game you've invested hundreds of hours in, or a person you're friends with who happens to be an AI, if those systems are completely centralized and controlled by a tiny handful of companies, that's more than an economic problem. That's no longer an issue of just inequality. It's actually a fundamental agency problem for you. And it's a fundamental issue if we want to build the most value we can out of these systems. So I think we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place in our current discourse. We hate big tech, and we hate the idea of consolidation by a few companies of AI. But many of us here on the kind of more liberal side of things also hate cryptocurrency and decentralization. We kind of have to pick our poison here. We're either going to live in a world where we find a way to make decentralization work, and then ideally have a lot more agency and ownership over these systems, or we're going to have to live in a world where we trust just a couple of companies to build and manage what becomes effectively our lives. I know which option I pick, because we've seen how the other one turns out. And I hope, for those of you that are listening here, that I might have spurred you on to maybe look again at what cryptocurrency can do, and also to think again about what a post-human economy might look like. Thank you.